Welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. Today's topic is one that so many learners struggle with: how to start a conversation in English without feeling awkward. You know, Nick, a lot of people tell us they can write essays in English, they can answer exam questions, but when it comes to starting a casual chat, they freeze.
That's so true, Emily. Starting a conversation can feel intimidating, especially if English isn't your first language. You're thinking about grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, all at the same time. But the good news is, starting a conversation doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes, it's just about using simple, natural phrases and showing interest in the other person.
Exactly. Let's think of real-life situations. Imagine you're at a cafe, and you see someone reading a book. You don't need to prepare a long, perfect sentence. You can start with something like, "That looks like an interesting book. What's it about?" It's short, natural, and it invites the other person to share.
I like that. And you can use the same idea at work or school. If you're next to someone in class, you can say, "Have you studied this before?" or "What do you think about today's lesson?" It doesn't need to be deep, it just needs to open the door to conversation.
And here's a secret. Native speakers also start conversations with very simple comments. Things like, "Nice weather today, isn't it?" or "The queue is really long, isn't it?" These are what we call small talk openers. They are safe, easy, and they break the silence.
Right, and another tip is to use compliments. People usually respond well to kindness. Saying something like, "I like your bag, where did you get it?" or "That's a great phone case," gives the other person a reason to reply. And from there, the conversation can naturally grow.
Yes, and the key is not to worry about being perfect. Even if you make a grammar mistake, the other person usually won't care, they'll appreciate the effort. The most important part is to smile, sound friendly, and keep your sentences simple at the start.
Exactly. Think of conversation starters as stepping stones. You don't need to cross the whole river at once. Just take one small step, and soon the flow of the conversation will carry you forward.
Another practical way to make conversations easier is to prepare a few go-to phrases that you can use in different situations. For example, if you're meeting someone new, you can say, "Hi, I don't think we've met before, I'm your name." Or if you're in a social setting, you might use, "How do you know everyone here?" Having these ready gives you confidence, because you don't need to invent sentences on the spot.
That's such a helpful strategy. And once you've started, keeping the conversation alive is the next step. One trick is to ask open-ended questions instead of yes or no questions. For instance, instead of saying, "Do you like music?" you can say, "What kind of music do you like?" That way, the other person has more to say, and it's easier for you to continue the flow.
Absolutely, and this is also where active listening becomes important. If someone says, "I love jazz," you can respond with, "Really? That's interesting. Who's your favorite artist?" By listening carefully and showing interest, you make the conversation feel natural, and you don't need to stress about what to say next.
And here's another tip: don't be afraid of silence. Sometimes people worry when there's a pause, but short silences are completely normal in conversations. Instead of panicking, you can just smile, take a breath, and then ask a simple follow-up question like, "So, have you always lived here?" or "What do you usually do on weekends?"
That's a good point, Nick. Silence doesn't mean failure, it just means the conversation is finding its rhythm. And often, people appreciate when you ask about them, because everyone likes to share their story.
Exactly. And the more you practice starting conversations, the less awkward it feels. Over time, it becomes second nature, just like riding a bike or learning to type. You might feel nervous in the beginning, but with repetition, your confidence will grow.
Another situation that comes up often is at work or school when you're around new people. Instead of worrying about saying something clever, you can start with context-based phrases. For example, this classroom is always so cold, isn't it? Or have you worked on this project before? These are simple observations, but they immediately create a connection, because they are about something you both share in the moment.
Yes, context is your best friend. If you're in a queue, you can say, "It looks like we'll be waiting for a while," or if you're in a cafe, "Do you come here often?" These short comments aren't just small talk, they're invitations for the other person to continue the conversation. It's like opening the door and saying, "You're welcome to step in."
And once you've started, the way you respond is just as important as the opener. If someone answers your question, don't just say, "Oh, okay." Instead, add a follow-up like, "That sounds fun. How long have you been doing that?" This makes the other person feel that you're genuinely interested, and it keeps the dialogue flowing naturally.
And one mistake learners often make is overthinking their grammar while trying to start a conversation. But honestly, when you're talking to someone face-to-face, it's your tone, body language, and willingness to engage that matter more than perfect grammar. Most people will focus on the meaning of what you're saying, not the technical details.
Exactly. So instead of aiming for perfection, aim for connection. Even if you forget a word, you can describe it. For example, if you don't remember the word umbrella, you can say, "The thing you use when it rains." People will understand you, and you'll keep the conversation going without feeling stuck.
That's such a useful reminder, Emily. Conversation is about building bridges, not about showing off perfect grammar. And the more you practice with these little techniques, the less pressure you'll feel, and the more natural your English will sound.
Another tip that works really well is to have a few universal topics in mind that you can always use when you don't know what to say. For example, you can talk about the weather, food, movies, or weekend plans. These are safe, light topics that everyone can relate to. So if there's an awkward pause, you can smoothly bring up one of these areas to keep things going.
Yes, I love that strategy. Think of them as your backup topics. If someone asks what you like to do in your free time, you can answer, but then also flip the question back to them. Like, "I enjoy watching films. What about you?" That way, it's not just one-sided, and you're creating balance in the conversation.
And something very important, smiling. A smile goes a long way in reducing awkwardness. When you smile, the other person feels comfortable, and it shows that you're approachable. Even if your English isn't perfect, your positive attitude makes the conversation enjoyable for both sides.
I completely agree. Confidence often comes from your body language before it comes from your words. Standing tall, making eye contact, and smiling, all of these things signal openness. So even if you're feeling nervous inside, your body can actually help set the tone of the conversation.
Another trick is to share small personal details that can invite someone to respond. For example, "I just started learning guitar," or "I tried a new restaurant yesterday." These little comments give the other person something to ask you about, and suddenly the conversation grows naturally.
And you don't always have to start with a question. Sometimes a simple statement works just as well, like, "This place has such nice music," or "It's been such a long day." Statements like these can encourage the other person to reply without putting pressure on them.
Yes, that's true. The goal isn't to impress people with fancy sentences, but to show interest and openness. Once you realize that, starting conversations becomes much less intimidating and a lot more fun.
And remember, every single conversation you have, no matter how small, is a win. Even if it feels awkward, even if you stumble, even if you mix up a word, guess what? You still communicated. And that's the whole point of language.
Exactly. The goal isn't perfection, it's connection. And the more you practice, the easier it will feel. You'll notice that conversations, which once felt impossible, slowly become natural. And one day, you'll look back and realize you're speaking without overthinking, without hesitation, without fear.
So, our message for you today is this: don't wait for confidence to magically appear. Create it by starting small, by being brave enough to say hello, by allowing yourself to be human in the process.
And we're proud of you for even listening to this episode, because it means you care about your growth, and you're taking steps forward. Keep going, you're closer than you think.
That's all for today's episode of the British Accent Podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope this conversation gave you encouragement and some practical ideas to try out.
We'll be back with another episode soon. Until then, keep practicing, keep connecting, and most importantly, don't be afraid to start that conversation.
Take care, and see you next time.